before I bring Dr. Bob Gill on, I'd just like to play a clip that was from an interview with someone called Andrew Marr, who's not Andrew Marr show. He's got his own show on LBC. It's a clip with an interview with Keir Starmer.
Can I ask you, do you stand by your pledge to support common ownership of rail, mail, energy and water?
Andrew, I'm pragmatic about this, not ideological. But we've got to face the reality of the situation, which is post-COVID. Our economy is in a different position. But I'm not one of these people that's ideological about it. It must be one thing or the other. We've got to be practical.
So things have changed.
Well, I mean, we're going to inherit a very broken economy.
What about the pledge that you'll end all private provision in the NHS? Is that still operative?
Well, look, there is some private provision in the NHS, and we're likely to have to continue with that. But I actually do believe strongly in the NHS as a public service. Well, Andrew, I'm not going to resile from my belief in the NHS as a public health provider. My wife worked in the NHS, my mum worked in the NHS, my sister worked in the NHS. It runs through our blood.
That was a very specific pledge, however, which has now gone. One more. You say that you would work shoulder to shoulder with the trade unions to stand up for working people. That will get a hollow laugh from the RMT today.
Well, Andrew, we have, with our unions, crafted a green paper, draft legislation ready for government, which sets out employment rights, day one employment rights, which are stronger than anything we've seen in this country. And all of our trade unions helped us with that. So that draft legislation is very much the product of that pledge, Andrew. But I mean, I would say this.
Okay, to be
Andrew,
absolutely,
just about those pledges. We had just because you put the pledges to me. We went through the hustings that all of the Tory candidates are going through now, and everybody at every hustings had a closing speech, and my closing speech was the same every single time, which was, if we don't win, all the things that all the candidates are saying will never come to pass. So I made it clear that anyone voting for me as leader of the Labour Party would have someone who is laser-like focused on winning an election. And that was my pitch to our Labour Party members.
We're also joined by Nick Csergo, NHS campaigner. Bob, I'm just wondering, is it compatible to have a lot of private companies within the NHS, and also to say that you support the NHS?
Absolutely not. So that interview is interesting for several reasons. Starmer talks about being pragmatic. We're in a post-COVID economy. Well, if there was ever a public crisis that showed the private sector doesn't work, it was the pandemic. What the government did, instead of investing in the NHS, they bailed out private hospital provision, and the pandemic response, 37 billion, was squandered on an outsourced response. So it was an utter disaster. We have one of the most expensive and worst pandemic responses in the world. So he is trying to make out that he's just being practical, which is a total nonsense. The second point he made was, we have private providers, and what can I do? We should leave them there. They're not doing any harm. They're doing a lot of harm. They are sucking out funding out of the NHS and skimming away profit. The running of a market and the whole business of outsourcing is itself very expensive. Estimates in the mid-2000s was that it was sucking out, just to run the market, 10% of the NHS budget. And in America, the fully privatized system, $1 in every 3 spent on healthcare goes out in just running the system. So there is a huge opportunity cost in running a privatized healthcare system. And then he talks about the NHS running through the blood of his family. The NHS is led by people who do not believe in the NHS. If you work in the NHS, it doesn't give you a get out of jail card for free. People who it is important for politicians to pledge allegiance to the idea of the NHS. Otherwise, it will be political suicide. But what's very important is we've just had the biggest legislative change in a decade, which has gone through Parliament and has now become law, which completes the replication of the American system, the creation of new public-private entities, integrated care systems, which effectively denationalizes the NHS and turns it into a series of 42 budgets, which are going to be controlled by the private sector, run like the rail franchise system. They'll all have their own negotiating positions. There will be a loss of national bargaining for the staff, and the budgets that will be given over will be fixed from which they can withdraw a profit. And the main way they're going to do that is to screw down the terms and conditions of the staff and deny care to the patients. Now, where is Starmer on any of this? He is deliberately silent on this major change that has happened, hoping nobody notices. So what we have in effect is an attack on the standard of living of the population at a time where everybody is already struggling. This government has doubled down on the class war, and I'm afraid Starmer's not on our side.
Yeah, and this thing about him, it runs through his blood. It's a bit like saying some of my best friends are, it's a kind of ridiculous argument, isn't it? As a distraction. You'd expect a Tory to say that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. Superficially, it's appealing to say, well, why would we not value a service that we work in? But it's totally distraction, and it's meaningless. It's a pathetic thing to say for a leading politician to make that sort of cheap point. Is given what he's not saying, is conspicuous that he has to rely on these cheap point scoring, So he's playing with people. He has got into power by lying to Labour members as being some sort of progressive politician. He's abandoned all his pledges. There needs to be a movement within Labour of the members who have been hoodwinked by him and got him elected. This, to me, is a form of fraud. If you put forward a policy program and you abandon it all and you got into power, you've committed fraud on your members. Right,
yeah. Certainly, I mean, it's a whole load of fraud. I mean, that's 10 pledges, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. Now, Nicholas, you wanted to speak on this. You've spoken on this before. Does it surprise you what Keir Starmer said?
No, it's not. I don't think it's either the turning point where suddenly it becomes clear that, oh my God, he doesn't back the public NHS. I think that those signs are being visible throughout, and they're not particular to Keir Starmer. The one who stood out, in fact, in this context was Jeremy, because he's the one who has continued to back the principles of the NHS long after the Labour Party institutionally ceased to do that. And so you generally have to read between the lines. I'm listening again just now, what Starmer says, that he backs the NHS as a public service provider. That's what he's saying. He's not saying, that's his love for the principles of the NHS. He's talking about having a role within a contract system where you have trusts or whatever, some kind of body like that. And that's not what the NHS was. The NHS was the state taking over everything and sharing it out fairly in a way that only the state could do. It brought us things such as a local GP to everybody, a local district general hospital with an A&E, which the private sector could not do and would not do because it's not profitable. And there's a really fundamental aspect of the whole business, is that you can't just put that in a box and sell it. Private sector won't run that. They won't do that. That's why you had to nationalize it in the first place. So you have to destroy that. We've had this process of destroying it over so many decades. And Labour's position on that, from Blair and throughout the 2010s, continued to be supportive of that process of destroying it. And a vital aspect of that is the ICS things we have today, which Bob mentioned. It's the US system. It's a system used by the state in the US for state-funded care. That's what they do, to maintain a minimum of state care, and the rest you have to pay privately for. And the stuff that's provided is so minimal that it's profitable to run. It's so much like rail you were talking about, the way that you close small railway countryside railway stations because they're not viable, they're not profitable. That kind of reduction that's happening with GPs, we're getting rid of the small local accessible GPs that you can walk to. All that stuff, if you pay attention to it. So the Labour the establishment, even throughout Jeremy's leadership, was so, I mean, Bob and I were in a meeting with Heidi Alexander with about 40 NHS campaigners, and she refused to oppose the body of the Tories' policies, which was run by a Blairite, which was Simon Stevens, and a bunch of other, at least 6 of Blair's advisors were involved in this. So the whole, and when a conference voted at least 3 years in a row to oppose the body of Tory policy on this, and the right-wing shadow health teams found ways to not oppose it. So this is not, you don't have to wait for Wes Streeting to say, oh, well, actually, a bit of private provision is fine, because throughout the whole, you know, the advisor that, you know, who worked for Keir Starmer, Ben Nunn, also worked for Heidi Alexander before that. He was on Owen Smith's campaign. All these things have just been there throughout.
Can I come back to something else?
It's not a surprise. Please.
Can I come back to something else? Bob, I noticed that some funding is going to Wes Streeting from private healthcare. I mean, he's being funded in some way by that. Does that not make enough of a case that he's not the right person to be holding that department? Oh, you're muted, I think. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, our politics has been corrupted by a revolving door situation where you've got people becoming MPs having worked in the big 4 accountancy firms or the think tanks, or themselves were lobbyists in a previous occupation. And then you have this funding. So if you fund politicians to the tune of tens of thousands of pounds, well, expect them to do your bidding. These rich people are not just giving away gifts. They want a return on their investment. And that return on investment is making sure the policy stream suits their own financial advantage. So that's what's happening here. It happens on a much larger scale in America. Money has corrupted politics. It's quite an easy thing to fix. You've got to say there is no external funding. You can only raise money from members, and it has to be limited. So until we get money out of politics, we are going to continue to get policies that further enrich the elites and bash down and screw down the working people of this country.